Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be taking a walkthrough from one of my most recent remixes. The track is called O.D.S.T. It's out in January 2022. Here's a walkthrough video of how I made it. This is going to be split into 4 parts. Part 1 coming up now. Okay, so part 1 of this video, we are going to be looking at the kick and the bass, the most important part of any hard trance track, I'm sure you will all agree. So first thing I'm going to do, I'm just going to remind you exactly what kind of sounds all together we are looking for. So I'm just going to loop a section here, just to give you a nice little reminder of what the finished article basically sounds like when it's all rolled into one. Okay, so I hope you like that. Now we're basically just going to pick this apart and we're going to see exactly what was done. Starting off with obviously the kick. Okay, so the kick is it's an old school kick. It is a Vengeance 1 clubby. Let's just quickly look to see what processing is done on that. Now the kick sends to a kick bus. Follow me along here. Kick bus sends to a kick and bass bus. There is a drum bus there for everything else. Just kind of goes in there. There's also a drum smash, which is basically, so what this essentially is parallel compression, just to give the kick a bit more of a dirty sound. I don't know why that's all the way over there in channel 27, but it is. So let's hear it on its own. It's quite well rounded. It's got enough. It's got a fair amount of body in it. So if I just put up, not balance, we want pads. No, we don't want pads, we want span. So just have a nice look at what's coming through. So it's basically, it's peaking about 70, which is, yeah, it's a taste thing. Every kick is different when it comes to where it should peak in the bass frequencies, but this one's at about 70. So let's have a look to see what's on there. So first thing first, obviously, is a camel fat. This is just for, well, there's not much going on in here. There's a little bit of compression for the most part, and a tiny amount of distortion. So let's see what difference it makes without it. Quite a lot, basically. There's a fair amount of difference between on and off, but it's kind of one of the first things you want to put on, in my opinion, just to make it a little bit more gritty of a sound. Next up, oh look, what surprise! My max bass is clipping. Oh dear, that's bad. So max bass, I'm sure you'll know what it does. It's just a kind of different way to balance your bass frequencies in a sound. Different to R bass. I know a lot of people love R bass. I do, but R bass wasn't right for this example, because obviously I kind of wanted to just redistribute the frequencies of your bass thing. So this is what it sounds with it and without it. It really just kind of adds a lot more weight in that all important low end, to really kind of give the kick that bit of smack that it really needs. Let's move on to the next one. So this is the Waves SSL Solid State Logic E channel. This is essentially a channel strip. Quite a bit going on here. I'm not going to get into massive amounts of detail, but as you can see, there's all sorts of EQ cuts going on. This is something that I'm definitely learning to use, because I've never really previously to this been massively big on channel strips, but I do it's definitely a really nice way, especially this one is really top quality one, and I think you can get it for like 30 quid on Waves. If you're that way inclined, I definitely recommend you give it a shout, but listen to the difference with and without it. Just adds to the weight. Sounds a little bit more hollow without it. Definitely makes it more of a rounded, more of a fat kick. And the next step is obviously a limiter, just to kind of more of a kind of peak control going on here. as you can see, it's really not limiting that much. It's just kind of taking away some peak ends to it. If you look at the attenuation bar here, you'll see just a little bit of attenuation going on in each hit. You know, you'd never really know that it's there. And then obviously you've got, so this is VPS Filter CM edition. This is free in older versions of the Computer Music Magazine. I don't know if it's still available. I haven't bought Computer Music Magazine for a while. If you can get hold of an older copy, I would definitely recommend it. This is a really good free filter to use, because unlike most filters, it gives you a low pass and a high pass on the same track, on the same VST, so you don't have to add in multiple VSTs to get a high pass and a low pass filter, should you choose to use it. It's also really flexible with the resonance curves. So if I just do this, you can do quite a lot with your resonance curves. So, but let's just return that back to flat, which is what it was. There we go. But yeah, so that's essentially just for some filter curves that happen later on in the track. That is sending to a kick bus, which has another filter on it and a PAS, which doesn't really mean doing anything. And then obviously your kick and bass sensor. This will work in comparison with basses. Obviously, there's nothing on here. I made the decision not to compress the kick and bass together at that stage, but they'll be doing so here at the drums bus, which also incidentally contains everything from the percussion. We were not going to look at percussion today, so I'm just going to mute this channel. Percussion will be in the next video, so we're just going to look at kick and basses in this video for now. So on the drum bus, again, there is another solid state Logic EQ. We'll listen to again with and without. Again, just kind of, rounding off the kick, making sure that it sits perfectly in the mix. And then this is essentially a bus compressor for your kick and your bass line. This is where I decided to run that compression, but this also obviously will include the percussion as well. So that's all that's really on the kick. It's not been that heavily processed. I try not to over process things. Quite often you'll find that less is more, especially in production, and it's all about the sounds that you choose, not so much about taking a sound and then absolutely destroying it with millions of plugins. Plus, your computer's never going to love you if you're running the full multiple versions of plugins and stuff. So try to keep it less is more, guys, is definitely something that I try and live by. So now we're going to move on to the basses. So there's a number of different kind of bass lines in use here. So I'm just gonna. So you've got essentially, first of all, I'm just going to explain what I've got here. We can forget LFO bass, you can forget bass drone. What we're looking at is intro, sub, and main. So intro bass is essentially, a specific bass that I've used direct wave for. I think it was silent, I'm not sure, but the intro bass essentially plays here, so you'll be able to hear it at the very start of the track. There we go. So that doesn't, it really only plays at certain parts in the track. It's not the main bass, so we're just going to concentrate on the kind of main basses which are listed here. So the first thing we're going to look at in that is the sub. So if I just solo this channel. Now this is Viper. I'm pretty sure I've said before, Viper is one of the best synths going. I absolutely love it. I pretty much use it in every track that I work on these days. But in this case, I just found a really good sub sound going on. So this is what the sub sounds like. Doesn't sound like much, but then subs, they don't really need to sound like much. Soloed, they're never going to sound great. It's a sub. It just kind of takes up sub frequencies to make your kick and bass absolutely rip. Which is why there's obviously not a lot going on this channel. So first of all is, again, limiter. Again, you'll see really not harsh limiting going on. Doesn't need it. Channel strip EQ, again, not without it. It's a bit much, you know. So there are filters on there to kind of tame it, making sure it fits properly, and a Pro Q with a huge cut off there up to 200. Sometimes you can go 200. You can quite often take it more than that. A lot of people cut their subs off at 150 and below, but in this case, it only needed to be 200 in order for it to fit. And then here is the Dodge Pro. Now, Dodge Pro is a volume automation, so it's similar to, you know, Gross Beat or LFO tool, stuff like that. I have done a video on free things on VSTs that perform the same function but are free. I'll be sure to put a link up to that later if you're interested in something similar. The thing about this is it enables you to do the same function but across the frequencies. But in this instance, because this is a sub bass, I've literally just done one on the main, but obviously if you want to do ones cuts for low, mid and high, you can do them here. Now this is quite a sharp cut here. Now the reason why I do this is because obviously the kick, you would assume, will go in the first half of the track, and then so you only really want the sub to take up the second half when the kick is tailing out. Now this will be completely different to the filter I have for the rest of the bass, which I believe is here. As you can see, a totally different, an absolutely completely different curve going on, because this little bit here is what gives the bass is kind of reverse bass sound, you know. This is what I, you know, came up with in the end. Whereas obviously you don't need, that sound doesn't come from your sub, so you don't need it in there. Plus, if you did have the sub in there, with the sub and the kick, you would just get a massive peak in the low end. It would take up all of your headroom and it would sound awful. So that's why it's done like that. But we'll get to that bit later. So the sub is going into, you know, a bass bus. Again, for filtering, and then we're going to move on to the next part of the track, which is the main bass. Now, I decided to sample this from an earlier project because contrary to my own my own advice, I did end up using quite a lot of plugins on this to get the sound that I wanted. So I felt it would just be a lot easier to just render it as a sample, one log sample, and just put it back in the track and work it from there. So we're going to now solo the main bass. That's without the sub, remember. If I put the sub in, sounds a lot fuller, doesn't it? So in the main bass, we'll just go through what I did there. So first of all, you've got, again, Camel Crusher, that good old staple. Sounds pretty bad without it, to be fair, doesn't it? And then again, channel strip, waves, E-channel, solid state logic. Way too much going on. If you take that out, that would totally dominate the entire track. Way too much if I didn't have this. Now next is REQ6. This is part of the Waves Renaissance bundle. It's not the cleanest EQ going, but it is kind of an analog modeled, I suppose, as they say. And I do like the sounds sometimes for it. In this instance, I literally just used it for one little cut. I needed an additional bit of EQ that I basically used up all the EQs I could on this, so I just needed one extra little bit of EQ. This isn't going to take much out. I don't know if you can hear the difference. Just a frequency that I felt didn't need to really be there, so I took it out. And then the next thing we've got here is the Ozone Imager. Now this is another free plugin. I would highly recommend everyone gets hold of this. And this just basically gives you a nice little stereo image view of your track, and if you want, it gives you the option to either stereoize it, make it wider, or monoize it and make it more narrow. So obviously, as this is a bass, I've taken this and narrowed it quite a lot. Not all the way. It's not 100% mono. I know the kind of the hard and fast rule for people is, oh, kick and bass in mono. doesn't necessarily need to be that. Kick, yes, I see it. Sub bass, absolutely. Anything that's sitting kind of above that sub range, you know, it's a taste thing. It's a does it work thing. It shouldn't be just I'll slap it straight in mono and work from there. You know, use your ears, make your own mind up. So we'll give you an example. So if I take this off, you may not be able to hear it if you're using laptop. If you're using proper studio speakers or headphones, you'll be able to hear the kind of difference in width that removing this plugin gives. I mean, don't get me wrong, I still think it sounds good with more stereo, but again, it's about fitting this into your mix. And, you know, if the track was a lot more stripped back, if there was a lot less to it, if there was a lot less going on, then I could easily, you know, put more bass in to take up that space. But there is quite a lot going on in this track, so I have had to kind of reduce the width and the space that this bass takes up in order for me not to get an absolutely horrendously cluttered mix. So I'll give you a nice example of kind of what it does in real time. So by moving the kind of width knob up. So see, at 0%, it's giving me loads of anti-phase, which is anything above here. Too much of that, then it won't sound good on a mono system, essentially. So definitely worth looking at when you're looking at mixdowns. You can get more advanced versions of these. I think I've got Ozone Imager 5. I think I picked it up for free on Plugin Boutique a while ago, and that enables you to do exactly the same thing, but across, I think, 4 bands. But this, I know, it didn't really need it, in my opinion, so I just slapped on the free version. Okay, so now this distortion layer, essentially what this is, I have run some of the sound into a separate channel to just distort it and get a kind of extra gritty sound going on. Now, obviously, the distortion is done with camel fat, and then I've EQ'd, obviously, the bits that I don't need. So resonant frequencies, you know, everything above 8K and everything below 250. And then I've run this back into the same channel, into the drum bus. So if you look, you've got your sample bass goes here, but your distorted layer also goes into the buses too. So if the best example I can show you of how this works is just by muting the distortion layer, so you can see the difference it makes. Now the distortion layer is fully monoed, but again, this is just to kind of add to that existing sound. So let's take a listen, hear the difference. So it's a lot more nasally, kind of loses a lot of the body and thickness without it. Definitely needed, in my opinion. Now these sounds are both running through to a bass bus, just kind of filtering, and a bit more Dodge Pro. Now the Dodge Pro here, this is technically also doing the sub bass and the main bass. Remember, the sub bass only literally comes up about here anyway, so it doesn't make a difference. It's not affecting the sub bass sound at all. So that's why I put it on there, because I didn't need to worry about it. So this is then sending through to kick and bass send, which obviously got nothing on it, and then you've got your drum bus as well, which is we've already gone through. I don't want that. We've already gone through these plugins and what they're doing, and that's pretty much it. It's it definitely, as I was saying, it can be a case of less is more. Less can definitely be more. You can get a full and fat drum and kick and bass sound without overly distorting stuff, without overly using too many plugins. And it's not, as I think I've shown here, there's not that much to it. It's just about the quality of the sounds that you put in, that you choose. I am really sorry I don't have the plugin information that I used for the main bass, obviously where I rendered it. Really sorry I don't have that. I don't know where that project is, or I would have recreated it for you instead of just using the main bass sample. But unfortunately, it's gone. It's gone, and it's not coming back. So I'm just going to have to deal with that, I'm afraid. But anyway, yeah, that's basically how I made this the kick and bass for this track. Stay tuned for the next video, which will be discussing all of the percussion that's going on and how it was made. And you know, that video might be a bit longer because obviously there's a lot more elements going on in those tracks. So stay tuned and check the next video out. I hope to see you there. Thanks for watching.